Pardon moi, mon français est malade. So I will be proceeding in English. What I want to talk about, three different environments in pure data and three different approaches to performance and improvisation. Now, these are three radically different projects, and I hope you'll understand that there is not yet a connection between them, although there are many implied connections between the different types of process and software that I'll be proposing. And you can see a graphic of roughly what I'm going to discuss. More will be revealed. So the first thing is MetaStudio. Now, a number of years ago I started using pure data. In fact, before that I was using MaxMSP. And when I was studying electronic music in the mid-90s, MaxMSP was the de rigueur way of creating interactive, that's a French word in an English context, sorry. The standard way of creating interactive electronic music. In fact, I studied MaxMSP in 1996, which I believe is when pure data was first conceived, or sometime around then, anyway. Not having a lot of money, and also being intrigued by the Linux operating system, I took the plunge into pure data in late 1999, and my first performance using pure data was in 2002, so it took me some considerable time to adapt from the MaxMSP environment to pure data and to incorporate it into my work. Now, previously I was using patches that were very much a spider's web of many different connections, and the MetaStudio was an attempt to create self-sufficient, self-contained modules of processing and signal generation that I could then combine into performance environments. And you can see one of these here. I'll show you a real environment very soon. So they are transitional objects, and they allow for very quick experimentation with combinations of synthesis, excitation, and processing, DSP. And I want to just pick up on a point that Peter Plessas made yesterday, which is that the boundaries between these different areas of research and practice are being blurred all the time, even more as we become more proficient at creating interfaces to audio and combining different software and different musical practices. So where Peter discussed the live electronic musician as both a catalyst and a performer, so also this software is a catalyst to modes of expression. So it is not just the generator of sound or the processor of sound, it is a system whereby the combination of these techniques can then yield something new, something fruitful. Does this work? Is that actually what happens? That is a question that I want to address later on in the presentation. And a further thing I wanted to integrate, this owes a heavy debt to me coming from the MaxMSP environment, in that I wanted to be able to store my settings. And of course, MaxMSP has that wonderful little object where you can just store a whole load of parameters in a single object. And pure data didn't have that, so I generated a system of storing information in different objects so that I could recall settings for a particular object. Another thing that I'm interested in, and have been interested in for a long time, is the metamorphosis of rhythm. And what I mean by that is to create rhythmic patterns that are fluid, that are flexible, that can be altered and intervened at very short notice. So they may start as one thing, and then by the alteration of a couple of parameters they can become something very different. And so I created a whole load of sequences as well. You can see several of them behind me. And the sequences are essentially just ways of organizing numerical values in a very rigid time frame. But that rigid time frame is what can be intervened in, and you can break the time into polyrhythmic subdivisions so that it can skip from one meter to another very quickly. And there's also a synchronization system built into the sequences so that polyrhythmic patterns can be juxtaposed. And here's an example. This is the rhythmic modulation frame of one of my sequences, and there are various different methods there. So you can alter the number of rhythmic divisions per beat. You can alter the polyrhythmic duration of each beat. You can create new patterns by reframing the current pattern, and there's positive or negative swing so that offbeats can be given a slightly later or earlier instantaneous instant, you know what I mean. They happen earlier or later by a small amount. Synchronization, the start and the end, and the step value for playback. So there are lots of different ways in which the rhythmic patterns and the rhythms themselves can be altered. And the point of this is not just to be able to alter them with the mouse, but also to be able to connect them to the outside world so that, for example, if I hit a button on my MIDI controller, I can completely change the whole rhythmic scheme of the patch. So these are the tools designed to be used for live performance, but designed also to contain some kind of structure, some kind of pre-composed structure. And I'm trying to find a middle path. I'm trying to find a path between something that's very rigorously composed and something that's very, very loosely organized. And MetaStudio modules, they output the data that they get in order to control them. So this allows for the very quick prototyping of experiments in synthesis. Not for great mathematical theories about synthesis, but just for the application of principles of synthesis that you might come across in your studies as an electronic music student, and then applied in ways that are non-conventional. And I'm going to show you this patch now. So this is just, or at least I think I am. Let me just do a little bit of Linux poking. So this presentation will not be as slick as the last one. It will involve a lot of swapping between a presentation and patches. And in here we have an experiment. Just set up the audio. Mac users will be going, I'm glad I bought a Mac, because they will not have to do quite so much of this. Okay, so yeah, we have something there. Okay, now, as you can see, I've neatly labeled everything so that I know exactly what's going on. And okay, so we have a sample. As you can see, not all of the objects are perfect. We have a sample, and this shows a number of different objects on the top right-hand side. It's just a lot of it's about convenience, but most of it is about speed. So when I'm going to approach the performance of a concert, maybe in pure data, and I want a bank of samples, I could either sit there laboriously adding them by hand, or I could bring up a sample box which already has a whole load of tables ready to be filled. and a system for loading an entire bank at a single time. So on the right-hand side, we have the sample box. Up on the left, we have a sampler, but one that takes an FM modulation signal. So the sample, it's another audio experiment to modulate a sample with an FM signal. That's not happening at the moment. Underneath, we have a delay, but the delay can be tuned, and the tuning of the delay will be... Here we go. So this is a comb filter, basically. So here's an example of some kind of experiment with synthesis. Now, I learned about FM in college, frequency modulation synthesis, but this delay line can act as a carrier for that as well because it has a signal input. None of this is revolutionary synthesis, but it does offer me a platform to be able to experiment with ideas. And so you can see we have a sort of sawtooth waveform that, there we go, based on the pitch of the delay. I can also change the shape of the sawtooth and So I have a number of techniques now at my fingertips that I can use to experiment with and modify sound. And by the way, I built this in my hotel room this morning. It took me about half an hour. So although this is quite a complex MetaStudio patch, to build something by hand in pure data without already having a set of high-level abstractions would take quite a lot longer, considerable amount longer. And as you can see, I also built into it some diagnostic utilities, like a little oscilloscope and a little spectrograph at the bottom here. So and just for fun, a nice high-low pass filter. And I can already imagine using this live. I can already imagine how I'd integrate this into a performance setup to provide a timbre or a tone or an idea of something that I could use to change the entirety of my improvisation, which, by the way, is entirely done in MetaStudio. So let me show you that for real now. And obviously, as with any software system, there are a certain amount of things you need to know before you can use it, one of which is the name of the objects. But of course, it's PD, so they're files, so they're in the folder. We can just look through the folder, bring up a trigger sequencer, and some of them have quite good documentation. So here we go. No, not that one. My mistake. This needs to be updated because that one does. So I need to update it to incorporate the help file in the 64-step version of this sequencer. And we have a very simple, this is a drum machine. There's nothing too complicated about it. Only one of the triggers at the bottom is connected. And you can see there that I'm just going to make a random fill of that table. In fact, I'm going to fill it all up. So that's just a pulse, not very exciting, but it allows me to demonstrate that you can very quickly change the rhythmic value. And these are integer ratio related, so this is 5 in the time of 4 or 3 in the time of 4. So there are experiments in rhythm that can be carried out using these sequences. And of course, totally random.